another broadcast of I Have a Testimony. I'm your host, Brother Willie Muhammad. And we thank each and every one of you all for tuning in each week as you all do. And today I am truly honored to have an opportunity to interview this brother who is one of the hip hop legends whose music helped to guide me growing up in the inner city of New Orleans, uptown New Orleans, during the time of the crack epidemic and the crack era. But his music helped to feed a seed in me and water a seed in me to help put me on this path that I am on today. He's a hip hop legend, as I said. He's a scholar, advocate for our youth and our people. And in my book, he's a supreme lyricist. And as well as that, he is also an author. Our guest today is our brother Wise Intelligent of the legendary hip hop group, the Poor Righteous Teachers. And today we're going to be talking about his powerful and significant book titled 3/5 of an MC, The Manufacturing of a Dumbed Down Rapper, right? But before we get into the actual interview, as always, I want to just play a clip as we play of our guests. I want to play a clip of our brother when he was actually speaking at a panel during Savior's Day on hip hop. Check it out.
It's actual fact. Yet it also speaks to the environment in which we are embedded as young black males and females in this particular society. Hip hop changing from positive to negative was not a consequence of history. It was not a circumstance of history. It was nothing that just happened on its own. It had nothing to do with the changing of the times. It had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with the fact that there are people in this particular society who wants to see us exactly where we are. And we cannot let that point elude us. These are the facts. How do we know? 1967, Kerner Commission report on urban disorder. When black people said, yo, we're tired of this system. You know what I mean? This system is oppressing us. So we rebelled against the system. We burned things. We said, yo, we had enough. He did his little report on what caused these riots. He said, what caused these riots? He said it was young children who started these riots, and what was motivating them was a high self-esteem and an enhanced racial pride. He said the majority of the rioters were high school dropouts, but they had a higher political orientation than their peers who did not drop out. And they saw the system as their enemy, so they attacked it in the right circumstance. So
Peace to bring our brother on. And for those who haven't seen that clip, you can see the rest of it on YouTube, but it is a powerful clip. So peace to the God, man.
Peace, Brother Willie.
Yes, sir. And thank you for accepting our invitation to be a guest here on I Have a Testimony. And I'd like to jump right into the actual interview, my brother. So, because there's a lot that I would like to ask you, but I know that our time is limited. So let's begin here. Can you explain the reason behind, what made you write this book, and what have you hoped to accomplish with the book, 3/5 of an MC, The Manufacturing of a Dumbed Down Rapper?
Well, I actually started writing that book in 2008, and I didn't publish it until about 12 years later, really, and the reason that I thought the book was necessary is because we're constantly in these conversations about rappers and hip hop, and how rappers are how hip hop shifted to this negative state, this sex, money, murder narrative, party and BS, constantly, where the drums were no longer for community warnings. We no longer using the drums for wars, no longer drums of war, and drums to inform the people. Now the drums are just for dancing, so I wanted to address how we got there, how we got to this place where hip hop is being perceived as strictly sex, money, murder, gangsterism, and things of that nature, and why, in what socioeconomic and political agenda it serves to be this way. Why is it important that it remains in this perpetual groove, stuck in this perpetual groove in the record? So I wrote the book, to address this, and to, a lot of people on face value will think that the book is about rappers. It's a judgment of rappers, a judgment of the MC, when in reality it's not. It's a critique of the system, the power structure that exists, that is in place, that has always been in place, and demands of us a certain level of complicity in our own demise, in order to eke out a living in this society. So that's what I wanted to address. And I wanted to put hip hop in its socioeconomic and political context outside of just party.
And you did an excellent job, brother, in addressing that and more. And when I received the book, I couldn't put it down. I continued to keep reading it. And I went through, as I said, my first reading. I'm planning on going back and reading it some more again for my second and third or fourth, however many more. But one of the things in the book that stood out to me is you show how the ghetto, as we hear that term, was created, right? Which the ghetto, which has created where blacks live, that it was not created by hip hop. And in fact, hip hop is more of a product of this quote unquote ghetto, right? So can you explain that what you talked about in the book, how hip hop didn't create the ghetto? Because if we listen to some of the criticisms of hip hop, many people try to make it seem as if the hip hop has caused this thing called the particular ghetto.
Right. So hip hop is basically the voice of youth who have been disenfranchised by the power structure in these ghettos. We represented the population group that had been redlined out of power, that had been concentrated, into areas of poverty and deprivation. So hip hop represented a platform for us to voice our opinion about the world. Hip hop represented the epistemology of ghetto youth, our interpretation of the world and our justified beliefs about it. When you understand how the ghetto was created through redlining and the intentional concentration of poverty, when you understand the dynamics that went into it, the legislative lynch mobs, the policies that were passed, to create this environment that created the deprivation, that made a lot of things that we began to engage, like even illicit drug activity, and how we began to see these things as viable economic vehicles in the community, because there was not a lot of options, so we have to understand how we got into any problem in order to understand how to get out of it. You can't come up with a solution to anything if you don't understand how the problem was created. It's basic math for me. It's basic math is, to undo multiplication, you have to do division. To undo addition, you have to do subtraction, right? So it's an inverse operation. So in order to understand how to invert the operation, you have to understand the problem itself. You have to understand what type of math was being used to get you here. And that's what it is. When we understand how this ghetto was created, when we understand the racism that went into the very infrastructure of ghetto life, and sustains and maintains it, the racism that sustains, maintains the ghetto, then we'll understand more the people that have been the victims on the short end of the ghetto stick, who represent the hip hop demographic. Hip hop is are those youth. If you go back, to the 70s, the 70s Bronx, 1970s Bronx, it was like a third world country. And a lot of people don't know that. It was burnt out buildings. It was gutted, burnt out buildings. The racism that went into the city planning of New York was replicated across the country. The racism was in the architecture. They would build bridges too low for buses to pass through, so that poor people couldn't go into certain neighborhoods and communities via bus. So, that's all a part of the infrastructure. So we have to understand that. Until we understand how deep the racism and the hatred was or is, we'll never understand hip hop. You never understand hip hop. So hip hop was a vehicle for us to talk about that, to report from our side of the equation, and that's why hip hop had to be controlled, because we were addressing oppression. We were using the platform to address oppressive systems, the oppressive power structure, racism, white supremacy, or the mythology of white supremacy, as I like to say.
And hearing your response is making me thinking about the opening chapters of the book, because you approach it kind of like a sociologist. You show all of those factors and things that went in that made the quote unquote ghetto, and then what came out of it. And as I was reading it, I was like, man, he could have said the same thing about the city of New Orleans. Same stuff. The like you said, the legislative lynchers and all of the stuff that they were doing, the red line and the red zoning. Now, you talked about the control, and this brings me to my next question in regards to the kidnapping and the hijacking of hip hop, because some people, when they hear that argument made, they say, "Oh, you all are just shunning responsibility. Nobody has hip hop kidnapped. They're not being forced to do this." So, can you talk about the captors and how the captors have, as you said in the book, how the captors have not only kidnapped hip hop, but then they turn around and defined what hip hop is?
Yeah, I mean, yes, people push back and say, we're making excuses for rappers and for individuals, who should know better and all of these things, However, I don't think what's not being considered is the power structure. It's if you're denied access, if you're denied opportunity, for centuries, and then you're given an opportunity to change your life. You're in this ghetto, this state of deprivation, where opportunities are dearth, right? There's a dearth of opportunities, and the school systems are the worst in the country. I cover some of that in the book as well, how the school systems contribute to the environment that creates the required state of deprivation to shape the behavior of the people or organisms that are in this environment. So if someone comes to you and say, okay, you can be a star, we give you $500,000 record deal, you come in, you sing these songs you love, you like to rap, you're a musician, you're an artist, you're talented, you come in and you say, okay, bet, I'm gonna do this record deal. And you bring your music, and your music is upliftment and empowerment for your community. It's politically conscious, it's socially conscious, and you bring it, and they listen to your music, and they say, "Oh, this is great. We love your music, but we're not really looking for this right now. This is not really what we're looking for right now." And you say, "Okay." You go on about your business. You thinking, "Okay, this is not it. This is not the music that I need to make." But then the other 10 artists who bring the sex, money, murder music, and they take that music, and you take this artist who's promoting sex, money, murder, and they blow this guy up. You see this guy, and you're like, wait a minute, this guy is winning. So this is what I need to do. So if I want to be a rapper, I have to emulate that. I have to, that's the point of reference for success in this space. It's no different from how sisters look at a successful Beyonce, or they look at a successful Cardi B, and they see the way she wear her hair, they see the way she dresses, they see these things, and they emulate these things because it looks like success now that it's rotating 30 times a day on the radio, it's streaming, forever, it's on world tours, you see it everywhere, it's getting corporate endorsements, it's doing the Pepsi commercials, it's doing the Super Bowl halftime, and you like, wait a minute, then it bags the top guy in the culture, now this is you have the relationship with the top guy in the culture, so it's like, wow. So this is what it is. This is what's popping. You know, when it's really mainstream media that's creating the perception of what's popping and what's not popping, right? So, for example, we would know nothing of Public Enemy if it wasn't for mainstream. If it wasn't for the mainstream, you know, we would know nothing of Poor Righteous Teachers if it wasn't for the same mainstream apparatus, the same mainstream apparatus that made Tupac and Biggie and Chief Keef and Lil Durk popular, made Poor Righteous Teachers popular, right? It's the same mainstream, right? So when the mainstream doesn't highlight the thing, it's not in your sight. You don't see it, so you don't think it's popping. If radio's not playing it, you don't think it's popping. You know, so they say, okay, this artist fell off or that artist fell off. That's why in the book, the chapter Lil Wayne versus the Big Five versus Lil Wayne, I'm explaining that Lil Wayne don't control the media. He don't control what the major corporation plays. They're not playing you because you're hot. They're not playing you just because you're talented. They're playing you because they have an agenda. And all of the content have to coincide with the agenda, right? So that being the case, the conscious rapper, the politically conscious rapper, he's not going to be in the platform. They're not going to finance that. They're not going to promote it. You know, and like I say, the golden era of hip hop, the so-called golden era of hip hop with the Poor Righteous Teachers, Public Enemies, X-Clans, Brand Nubians, and groups like that, that was a glitch in the matrix. That's when they were really starting to understand the power and influence of hip hop. Because in that era, 83, 93, or more like 86, 96, we were motivating youth towards positive attitudes, lifestyles, and we were on the front lines of movements on the ground in the community. You know, we were protesting everything from violence to apartheid South Africa, you know, so it was a big difference. And they saw the impact. They saw hip hop's ability not only to mobilize people to a dance floor, but to mobilize people politically, you know, so that's why it had to be hijacked. You know, it had to be taken control of and used to promote sex, money, murder, consumer-oriented materialism, and you know, and create mascots for capitalism, and that's pretty much where it ended up. You know, so you know, you take an artist from the ghetto, a young kid from the ghetto. He doesn't even have to be an artist. He don't have to be a rapper. You know, you just take a young kid from a ghetto in general. You know, living in the projects. You know, he's living in a low-income housing project. His mother's on drugs. Everybody in this community, you know, well, the first business he sees when he walk out of his door is drug dealing. Right? It's the first thing he sees, right? So everybody in the community, it's a below 500 credit score community, right? Everybody's in a state of struggle. Everybody's in survival mode, right? So when you're in that state of survival, you're constantly stressed. You're trying to find a way out. You're trying to, you know, and somebody come and offer you $500,000 to talk about sex, money, and murder.
No
you're
problem.
Like, that's an upgrade. That's a come up from actually living in this state of sex, money, and murder, you know, and being in this environment that was created to yield those types of results. You know, so I mean, I'm from projects. I'm from low income housing project, Trenton, New Jersey, where you could pay a kid, you could give a kid $200 to hold a package, and he's rich. We hood rich. You know what I mean? You hood rich. Like, you know what I mean? You know, I'm 13, 14 years old. And he give me the brown paper bag. Like, yo, just hold this right here. You know what I mean? Hold this right here. Don't move. Just sit right here on the stoop and hold that. You know what I mean? While, you know what I mean? While the OGs, the big homies, while the big homies doing their thing, and they come back when they need to, you know,
get some more.
And they hit the block. You know what I mean? So what makes you think a kid is going to pass up $500,000? And
that's the thing, man.
Other things is, you know, exactly. So, you know, think about it, right? Think about it. You know, I could do sequels to this book. I could do 3/5 and educate 3/5 and teach the manufacturing of dumbed down teachers.
Of a mayor, you said.
I could do 3/5 of politician, the manufacturing of dumbed down representatives, right? I could do that. I could do this in every segment of society when it comes to Black people, because we're expected to dumb ourselves down. We're expected to impose ignorance on ourselves when it comes to the racial implications of this society. When it comes down to discussing the racial dynamics of America, we're expected to be silent. I got a quote from Barack Obama saying as much in the book.
Yeah.
Barack Obama said it himself.
Yeah.
So it's like, so what use are you to us as a president if you can't say what's really real when it comes to the racial dynamics of the United States of America? So that's the thing. This happens at every level of our society. You know, I quote Spike Lee in the book when he's talking about it in terms of film. He said, I don't have a problem getting funded for films.
Yeah.
I get a problem when I'm trying to get those films that I want to make funded. You know what I mean? He said, when I'm trying to make a film where a Black person is not dancing in the first 30 seconds of the opening of the intro, I can't get funding for that. I can only get funding for the degrading movies.
Yeah, man.
That was his position, right? So that's the same thing with the rapper. The rapper is no different. The rapper can only be funded at the mainstream and the major label level if he is dumbing down to the sex, money, murder narrative.
Yeah. You know, there's a movie that's about to come out. It's called American Fiction. I don't know if you saw the trailer. I think it comes out this Friday or next Tuesday, where it's about an author, is a brother, and the sister who did Insecure, she's in it as well. But from the trailer, he was writing like intelligent literature and it was not getting anything. And then one day he just, out of rebellion and just trying to make mockery of them, he wrote just some old coon type stuff, and it began to just start blowing up. And he became on a national #1 seller, right? But it's the same stuff. It's the same stuff going over and over again. And I want to quote this part from your book, because you kind of touched on it, but I would like the audience to hear you break down the thing about the Skinner rat. But I want to read this, and then we're gonna put the clip up out, the image of the book. But it says this in the book, quote, "This book is by no means an indictment of today's mainstream rap artists. I must make clear that the perceived destructive and reckless behavior exhibited by most of today's mainstream rappers represent what those who control the social machinery for mass public opinion and opinion manipulation want the world to believe about Black people in general," right? End of quote. Now, what I found interesting about that, shortly after you make that statement, you start talking about Dr. Amos Wilson's words about the example of the Skinner rat, right? So for the audience, can you talk about that experiment as it relates to the mainstream rap, or the behavior of the mainstream rap artists today?
Right. So B.F. Skinner was a behaviorist. You know, he followed from the school of thought of the great advertiser and behaviorist John B. Watson, right? And John B. Watson has a quote where he said, I'm paraphrasing now, but give me 10 children of any background, of any pedigree, regardless of their racial origin, their parents, what their parent station is in life, from any level of society. Give me these children and I can turn them into anything I want, as long as I control the specified world. If I can control the specified environment, I can turn them into a lawyer, a doctor. He said a lawyer, a doctor, a beggar, and a thief. He can turn them into anything he wants if he can control the specified environment. So B.F. Skinner did the research, did the science with rats. He created the required or specified environment for the rats. He put the rats into the box, right? Called the Skinner box. Put the rats in the box and, and didn't feed the rats. He put the rats in the box and they had to figure out how to eat. So he put the food dispenser in the box, and he had he had food dispenser in the box. He had a lever for them to push to receive the food from the boxes. And when he put the rat in the box, the rat would figure out, once the rat figured out that if he pushed the lever, he could eat. Pellets would drop out, he can eat. And the rat started consciously pushing that lever to get the food. He started, now he know. So Skinner had basically induced into the rat a pattern of behavior that didn't exist before the rat entered the box, right? So he just shaped behavior. The environment shaped behavior. So then he put a rat in the box that didn't know about the lever, while the other rat did know. So the other rat is like, how we gonna eat up in here, right? So you see the other rat push the lever, and now he's learning. He learns that, okay, this is how we eat. This is how we eat. He pushed it, and he pushed the button, and he got the food, and boom. So the rapper, and not just the rapper, employees in general, once they created the state of deprivation that was required for the rapper, hip hop, the mainstream box, they have this mainstream box that they create, and they create it and they control. And they said, okay, if you want to eat as a rapper, if you want to eat off your career, if you want to make money in this rap space, after this deprivation, you know what I mean? You're already in this state of deprivation. They created this thing. So now they're like, this is how you eat. This is how you eat. You have to behave this way in order to eat. You have to adopt this behavior in order to eat. And once they learn the behavior, it's like, okay, we see what y'all want. Y'all want this nigga shit. You know what I mean? So, okay. So then the next kid see it and like, oh, okay, I got to be drilling, stepping, and you know what I mean? And spinning blocks. So boom, okay, that's what it is. So now they're pushing the lever. And the food is dispensing. That's basic behavior shaping. This is how environment shapes behavior. But he who controls the environment controls the behavior. And it's the same thing with the ghetto. The ghetto itself, it's a Skinner box. It's a Skinner box. They created the state of deprivation. They forced you into it. They concentrated all of you into this space, created a state of impoverishment, and then said, okay, if you want to eat,
this is what you have to do.
Here's what you have to do. You have to sell this drug. They flooded the community with the drug. Said, okay, so you see the kids selling the drugs, you come out your house, the businesses you see, the only business you see that seems to be proliferating,
we're gonna do it,
is drug dealing. So you're like, okay, this is how you make money. This is how you learn to make money. So you learn to make money, you learn to eat. So and what they say, I gotta eat. That's what the kids say, right? That's what we say in the streets. We're like, yo, I gotta eat.
And the cheese.
Eat, right? I gotta eat. We call it cheese. We call the money cheese, right? You tell somebody you're a rat.
And you're in the trap.
The place we live is a project, an experiment, right? It's a project. It's a science project. It's a science project. Live in a project. We call it money cheese. It's what it is. Wow. So this thing is obvious. It's very obvious. It's very planned. They've admitted it all. That's why in the book you see the sources that I'm using are not sources. It's not sources that can easily be dismissed. People like Walter Thabitz. Walter Thabitz. Is a city planner. He's a city planner, city organizer. These dudes are social engineers, man. These people are social engineers. They know what they did. And they documented it. I'm just showing you how it adds up to where we are today. How it shaped behavior, how that environment that they created is shaping the behavior that we see today. And we see it across the board. They don't. Teachers can't say anything. We're think about it right now in states across America. They're banning African studies. They're banning history that puts the reality in its proper context.
After they weren't never really even
They
teaching it
wasn't really
properly.
even teaching it, right? They wasn't
Yeah.
really even teaching, but now they're ensuring because they see a wave, this whole wave with the quote unquote Black Lives Matter
Yeah.
movement and George Floyd and the discussion
Yeah.
around white
Yeah.
racism, you know, uh,
Critical race
cultural
theory.
hegemony, So now they're like, wait a minute, we have to remove these things. We have to ban the teaching of these truths. And it's the same thing. So hip hop is no different from rest of America.
And that's the thing, man. And hip hop is not immune to the overall technology that they're using on all aspects dealing with black people, food, you know what I'm saying,
Absolutely.
education and everything. And that leads me to this point because this is something I'm starting to see, and I don't know if you're aware of it as well. I'm starting to see a pattern that's starting to begin. Of course, we used to have those like Dolores Tucker and all of the others, and we knew what they were as related to hip hop. But now I'm starting to see that some of those who are among the group who know the history of oppression of our people, who know what these people who have some knowledge of our existence in this country and what this country has done to us. I'm starting to see them join the chorus of condemnation of hip hop artists from this angle, blaming hip hop artists for the situation in the black community. Like some people who will be considered to be conscious. So my question to you is, why do you think that is happening, and what can we do to begin to start combating that from this segment of the conscious community?
Yeah, I mean, the conversation is necessary. It's very necessary, and I think that the focus for me is always the manufacturer
Mm-hmm.
of the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I like to get to the source. It's a root cause analysis for me.
Mm-hmm.
I see the rapper as a symptom. I see the rapper as a symptom and a tool.
Mm-hmm.
He's a tool, and I think that he needs to be made aware of the fact that he's being used as a tool. I have a song on a new project that I'm working on. It should be first quarter of next year.
Yes, sir.
It's called Power Tools, White Power Tools.
Mm.
It's called White Power Tools. And the rapper is one of those. The mainstream rapper is a white power tool. But and making them aware of that is important that we point that out. But we have to put it in its proper context by defining the environment, the mechanisms that contribute to the reality, and that shapes the reality. And that's my thing. People are gonna always blame the rapper. The black man and woman has always been the softest target in the country. It's like, not gonna get a lot of pushback, but going addressing Leo Cohen is a different thing. Addressing Jimmy Iovine is a different kind of thing. Addressing Sony Music Group or addressing one of these major labels, Universal Music Group, it's just a different type of thing. It's a bigger thing, but it's what needs to happen because these problems are institutional. Our problems are all institutional. They're not individual, personal, or private.
Yeah.
These are institutional problems. We deal with racism because we have to deal with the institutions that they control. And that's why we bump into racism on a constant basis. Every institution in the society, whether it's the educational institutions, the financial institutions, the religious institutions, the political institutions, the judicial institutions, it doesn't matter. That's where we've run into racism at, because these are institutions, and racism is a power construct that's exercised at the institutional level. Without institutional control, you can't exact racism. You can't even run the racism game. You can't even play, because it's institutional. It's a power construct. Without power, you can't be racist.
Yeah.
Because you have to have the ability to affect the lives of a group of people, of an entire population group. So being able to do that, like for example, Black people in America don't have or control the educational institutions to deny white youth or white students a Eurocentric curriculum.
Yeah.
We can't deny them that, but they're in power in a way that they control the institution, so they can deny us an African-centered or Afrocentric curriculum.
Exactly.
So, and that's every institution in the society. Until we control institutions that are focused and driven towards the sustenance and preservation of Black people,
we're not.
We're gonna be in this. We're gonna be in this predicament. And the music industry is an industry that we don't control.
It's a
So
fact.
we're dealing with this cultural arts institution that is a record label, and they have a history of presenting the worst of us.
Definitely, and it goes in accord with the overall idea that they've had of us, that they formulated to even justify taking our ancestors from Africa and bringing them over here. And what was interesting also about your book, I had heard about this before and talked about it briefly one time in some lectures, but you actually go into it and really point out the hypocrisy of how they use hip hop as a chess on a piece on their chessboard. And I'm talking about in regards to when Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State at one point, how her use of hip hop music as a part of America's foreign policy program. So can you share with your thoughts regarding their motive for doing such, how here in America, they do whatever to drown or bury the conscious artists, the socially conscious artists in the mainstream, but then they're finding artists like that, and then they go and promote their music to other people in other countries over throughout the world. Can you talk about that?
Right. Yeah, right. That's the irony. That's the irony. That's the nature of the beast. They understand the power of hip hop. They understand the influence of hip hop music, hip hop culture, and rap music. They understand the influence and its ability to mobilize young people to action, right? So while they're here in the United States, impeding the narrative behind positive hip hop in the mainstream. They're impeding your access as a conscious artist in the mainstream. They don't want that voice heard in the mainstream, right? At any cost. They're not going to finance that. They're going to finance sex, money, and murder in the United States. That's what they're going to finance. But the same country is taking those conscious artists, from ghettos, packaging them in a state-funded, a federally funded program, and sending these artists overseas to political hotspots, into countries that the United States got beef with, to cause disruption, in those societies, to cause youth uprisings against their governments. So all the music about oppressive governments and tyranny and cultural hegemony, and imperialism and capitalism, all the songs that Black youth make about those things that can't make it to the mainstream in the United States. The United States package it, sends it overseas to cause rebellions against the governments there, when the very youth that they're packaging and sending over there can't address their issues here with the government of the United States. That is what I mean by they're controlling this whole song and dance. This thing has been under their control. Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. She ran a program called the Rhythm Roads Program. And she was packaged, and she said it. She said, yes, I see hip hop as a piece on my chessboard. And that's the way she's using it, because she understands that music is a weapon. Music is a weapon, and they've weaponized it against us. And that's the thing that we don't grasp. When you just go back and do a cursory study of the Rhythm Roads program and the revolutions and the uprisings that occurred around the world around the same time as that program, you'll see they sent them to Libya just before that uprising. They sent them to Egypt. They sent them to Syria. They sent them to a couple other places, that United States had these issues with, that they were going to eventually invade and try to topple. And we have to understand how they use it. They did the same thing in Eastern Europe. And then the same organizers of the hip hop concerts that was mobilizing those youth over there to rebel against their government, those same organizers, they took them to Cuba to try and overthrow Castro. And they were caught. They were being funded by US aid. The hip hop kids were being funded by hip hop aids, but they were agents working for the state to cause uprisings and rebellion in Cuba. So, this is all history.
Yeah, man.
It's no conspiracy theories.
It's out there. It's out there, brother. And they just it's out there. Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And it's out there, and it's just. And sometimes, I'm talking to people and I realize, like, man, they haven't even read what I read. So they don't even realize, like this. It sounds like this is some stuff from a movie. No, but this is real. These people have actually done that. And while we're talking about that, I've had conversations with some people recently about hip hop. And I came to the conclusion, I asked them, I said, could we be asking some of these artists to do something that they don't even have the knowledge base to do, right? Because I think sometimes people see, because they have money and they have material things, people think that they know certain stuff, but they really don't. And it leads me to this question, because you brought it up in your book using Young Buck, but I also want to talk about with our brother here, Lloyd Banks, when he was with G Unit. And you talked about how in one of the interviews he did, where he basically was like, listen, man, I ain't getting into that socially conscious stuff because they kill rappers. So in addition to rewarding people for the party and the BS type of music and rewarding that behavior, if you make it past there, then we're going to put this seed of fear in you to further another block to make you say, don't pick up that mic and do this. Can you talk about what what's my man name? Lloyd Banks said about how they kill rappers who do that type of stuff, or leaders.
Yeah, I mean, there's a historical precedence for that. We have a memory that connects us to Fred Hampton. We have a memory that connects us to Martin Luther King, to Malcolm X. We have a memory of these assassinations. So we know the cost of political action, of going against the grain, going against this systemic narrative, going against the power structure, going against the lying law. There's a cost to be paid. There's a sacrifice. That's why we call it sacrifice, right? This is why it's a sacrifice. So I get it. But again, we have to make that sacrifice.
That's right.
Because while you have rights, you also have duties.
Great point.
You know what I mean? So we have certain obligations, I feel, especially artists, because it's the job of the artist to hold the world accountable.
And that's it. And we'll make this slight transition. I want to talk about, because I'm happy to hear, and I saw you posted a little something on your Instagram today. You were in the studio, so I'm like, oh yeah, we got something that's being cooked up. So for those who are watching, our brother hasn't stopped making music. His most recent album was in 2020 with his title "I'm the Side," right? Am I right? That "I'm the Side," but one of my top 5 all-time hip-hop albums, brother, is this album right here. When I tell you a perfect album, man, listen to me. When I tell you a perfect album, that's a perfect album. When I say my book, a perfect album is the beats are slamming and the lyrics are slamming. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes you have quote unquote conscious rappers. They may have the lyrics, but sometimes the tracks are not there. But when I tell you from the beginning to the end of that, and you was dropping, I'll never forget on one of the lines, you say you can take my album, go home and study it and come up with a plus lesson. I said, oh my goodness. That's how much you be teaching from the from it, right? So can you, that's my favorite album. I got to ask you this question. Can you just talk about that whole process, man, of making that album, The New World Order? Because to me, it's a classic album.
That was 96. We, you know, we were thick in what was happening politically around the world, you know, and how it affected us as a group, how it affected poor people everywhere, oppressed people everywhere, you know, and what was coming, you know. So, you know, we decided to do something that would bring people's attention to it. And so we also had the, you know, inside that cover, we had books. We had, you know, a ton of books inside the cover, so that when people flip the jacket open, it's books that you can go and start and go down the rabbit hole yourself, you know. But yeah, man, we were just there at that time, you know. That's where I was, you know, in terms of self-education, self-study, learning more about myself, the world, the group to which I belong, you know, and the dynamics of world politics and how everything is set up and who's running things, you know, and where they're going with it. And now we see today they're there.
Yeah, there. And there was
They're
some
there, you
hitters
know.
on that. You KRS-One, the Fugees, man, there was some people coming hard with it. And while listening to your music, I came across this, and I got to show this album cover. I want to leave that up there for a while, right? And I thought about, you know, like how in this album you give, to me, from my perspective, you articulate points, right, that to me would help people to fight back some of the stuff that was being thrown at the Black community every time we tried to stand up and push back against police brutality. You know, talking about, oh, we have good cops. Oh, look at what's going on in the Black community. And you got that one of the songs on there, Good Cop, and like, man, you going through it, right? And I just thought about what would it have been like in the height of this, the George Floyds and all of that type of stuff, for music from this album to be punked, right? And of course, they definitely would not allow that to happen. So can you just talk about, what do you think the impact of an album like that would have been if the mainstream, or if more of our people had access to it in light of the atmosphere we were facing then and still now with police brutality?
I'd be going to the grocery store with trauma plates on. I had a flat jacket on. I had a vest on. I had to go to the grocery store with the vest on. You know, yeah. That's the thing. You know, that's our news. That's the news from our perspective. That's the news from on the ground. That's the history of policing in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's how it began.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that narrative, that historical context, that socio-political context is excluded,
yeah, man,
from the national discussion when it comes to hip hop.
Yeah,
you know, because they have, you know, it's like they have to exclude that. They have to exclude that narrative. They have to exclude the historians, the intellectuals from our community, because they have to present the idea, or they have to, the narrative has to, the artist has to align with the historical stereotype
of what's
and
going
lying
on.
lore of the Black male being feeble-minded, infantile, you know, and incapable of intellectual dialogue and thought and understanding around these things, you know. So that critical analysis of the power structure has to be excluded from the platform, because it holds a mirror up to, you know, to those with vested interest in keeping this
And
segment.
and it makes me think about, you quoted, I forgot who you quoted. It was a black female singer. I may have been Maya Angelou or somebody was saying that by us being silent about our suffering, they would begin to start interpreting that as we enjoy. Remember that quote you in the book you quoted that? There was
Yeah, Zora Neale Hurston.
yeah, Zora Neale Hurston.
Yeah,
Because when you see, you think
anthropologist.
about like here, I know if they didn't want Young Buck to make that song that he released a song he was gonna do about police brutality. But I can imagine this album right here is just straight up haymakers from the beginning to the end, dealing strictly with that subject. And look at the cover itself.
Yeah.
You know, so if they don't get the lyrics, just the cover itself. And you had anything else you want to say? And we'll go to this next question on that.
No, good.
And I'm just thinking about, Kanye West is in the news media today because he has the black hood on. I'm thinking, look at that cover. And so you talked about you're getting back in the studio. Tell us about what you're currently working on, man.
I actually have 2 full-length albums that I completed before the pandemic. So about 2019, 2020, I haven't released them, but I'm releasing them. I'm just building out this new platform. The website is being finished up now. It's a subscription-based platform where you can only access the music by subscribing to the platform, because I only want to deal with people who are really, serious about music and preserving the culture and the narrative, the narrative. So the platform is a blockchain-based platform, and it allows artists to position their music, in a way where they have direct engagement with their fans. They can create unique experiences with their fans, supporters, and collectors. And at the same time, they get to donate percentages of sales directly to organizations in the community that's helping the community. So it's a way for the community to benefit from the culture that they created. You know what I mean? So, you think about it, for 50 years, hip hop hasn't really built any institutions or given back much to the organizations that are on the ground helping with the babies, helping educate the babies, helping keep the babies on the straight and narrow, motivating youth towards positive attitudes and lifestyles. Those organizations, those people on the ground need support, so this platform will allow artists to choose a charity of their choice in any city that they live in or wherever they're from, and a percentage will go to that organization without any negotiation, it happens automatically through smart contracts on the blockchain.
That's new, man. And keep us posted. Whatever we can do to get the word out and promote your projects, we definitely will. And as we get ready to close this last question, I didn't know this, in regards to Rap Snacks, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, I mean, I grew up in New Orleans, going into the little, we call them corner stores here.
Absolutely.
And I would see like the Rap Snacks, and then I'm preparing for this. I'm watching interviews, and so you are involved in this endeavor. Can you talk more about how you came about, how you became involved in it, and what's the overall objective? And we'll put the picture back up too.
Yeah, I'm currently president of the Rap Snacks Foundation.
Wow.
So Rap Snacks was founded by my guy, James Lindsay. James Lindsay is from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm from Jersey, of course. And we met through a mutual friend, a brother who's also Nation of Islam, so he introduced us in 96. Rap Snacks launched in 94. So James and I became super tight in 96, and we've been rocking ever since then. So I've been around for like 30 years. I mean, James' relationship is like 30 years deep. So James launched Rap Snacks. We were rocking in Philly for a minute. We were working out of Manayunk in Philly. It's a suburb of Philly, little town over in Philly. Had an office over there, working hard, started rocking with Universal Music. that's where the relationship with Master P came in. James developed a strong relationship with P, and the product started to take off. It took off. You started putting artists on the bags. Originally, there was no artists on the bags. It was a caricature. It was MC Potato, you know what I mean, on the bag. And around 97, that's when the first artists started appearing on the bags through a partnership with Universal Music Group. And then James ended up managing Meek Mill for 10 years. So he was part of Meek's team for 10 years. And right up to 2016, he wanted to relaunch Rap Snacks. And you got to understand now, back 94, 96, the internet wasn't what it is. The internet wasn't a thing. So 2016, the internet is jumping. So the relaunch of Rap Snacks was just ideal, and it took off. So James always, we used to talk about it a lot, about leveraging the influence of hip hop and the success of Rap Snacks into community engagement to help youth find their way. Because that's what I was doing for a while in Jersey. For a long time in Jersey, youth advocacy, developing youth programs, working with the school systems, things of that nature on the ground. So it's something that comes naturally for me, and so we said, hey, it's time to do it. At that point I had moved to Atlanta in 2015. I had moved to Atlanta. A year later, James moved to Atlanta, and came to the house. He's like, yo, we don't go. So, we launched we launched the foundation in 2018, and then I moved to Miami. Rap Snacks headquarters is now in Miami. This was 2018. We've been in Miami for about 5 years, going on 6 years.
Wow.
And we've been going hard, developing entrepreneurship, financial capability programs with youth, music programs, music monetization, and cultural resource capture in terms of music. So yeah, we've been at it. We've been at it, just trying to find ways, develop ways for the community to benefit from the success of a culture that they created. It's like you go back to any of the communities that hip hop started, like the Bronx. The Bronx is leaking. Kids in the Bronx trying to leave the Bronx. They're trying to flee the Bronx. You go to, you look at all the hip hop that came out of New Orleans. And kids are trying to flee. Kids are trying to find their way. Kids are still out, suffering. So, our thing is cultural resource capture. Hip hop is a cultural resource of the Black community. Just like all American music. All American music is Black music.
That's true.
So music in general is a cultural resource of the Black community. However, that multi-billion-dollar, $20-50 billion industry, globally is, we're seeing less than 1% of the receipts from that business in the communities that create the music. So developing programs that can become institutions for cultural resource capture, so that the success of hip hop can be felt in the communities on a real sustainable way.
Wow.
That's what it's about for us with the Rap Snacks Foundation.
That's dope, man. So now I know what the history behind it, and tell people like, listen, we need to support this, man. So as we get ready to close, was there anything you wanted to say that you didn't get the opportunity to say, maybe because I didn't ask the question? If so, here's your opportunity. If not, man, we really thank you for all that you are doing, will do, and even all that you have done, because from the group of people I know, when we talk about hip hop music that help to build and add and feed and water our consciousness, right along with Public Enemy and the Queen Latifahs, is Poor Righteous Teachers.
So
Is Poor Righteous. We posted a flyer today, people were like, oh man, rock this funky joint. I remember growing up in New Orleans, brother, and hearing that, and word is life, word is bond, my word. And I'm rapping it without understanding what it was, and then to grow into the knowledge, like, oh snap, but that was all a part of the path and the seeds being planted. So I thank you
Indeed.
that. Thank you for that.
I appreciate you having me. One thing that I would like to point out that we hear a lot of discussions and talk around hip hop and how hip hop has changed and how hip hop is different than it used to be. But in reality, hip hop has not changed at all.
That's what you
Hip
said in
hop
the
is
book.
the same as it's always been.
Yes.
The reason that it appears
Yes.
that hip hop has changed is because we've been allowing the mainstream to dictate to us what hip hop is or what hip hop is not.
Yes.
Outside of the mainstream, rap artists are as conscious as they've ever been.
Yes.
They are politically conscious as they've ever been. They are socially conscious as they've ever been. They are on the ground, with youth advocacy and in the community like never before. So hip hop hasn't changed in terms of its content, subject matter. It's just that the mainstream filter, through which we're viewing hip hop, we're viewing hip hop through a mainstream lens.
Man.
And when you do that, you're allowing your enemy to dictate to you what your culture is, what your people are, and who you are. Turn off the TV, turn off the mainstream. Get in the trenches. And seek out the artists. Seek out the artists that you say you want to hit. They exist. They just can't get the burn. They can't get the financial backing or the support from mainstream or major labels. So, but they exist. Hip hop hasn't changed. And that's real.
Stop looking for the artists that this white mainstream industry has approved, and we're glad that you close on that point, because often I will tell people, and when I'm a part of these panels and discussions, I would say, if quote unquote Martians came to America, came to the earth, and they just heard us talking about hip hop, the hip hop that exists, just based upon black peoples who have issues with the current state of hip hop talking about it, I said these quote unquote aliens would think that this is the only form of hip hop because that's all people are talking about. But just like you say in the book, these artists are still out here. And I would encourage anybody who's watching this interview to go look at our brothers, the albums. He's still dropping music all the way from this time, all the way to the 2000s. And he is just one of the many artists that are out there. There's a sister, I saw you mentioned her in the interview. I came across her on TikTok. She's Afrocentric, flow off a lot of the like popular hip hop beats. Saba something. I can't think of her name.
Goddess.
Ooh, she fire. You have Cyrock. You have they're out there. We just can't be lazy, and we have to use our platform and promote those artists who have the music that we say we want to hear.
Absolutely. Like I said, I have 2 new projects that I'm going to be dropping first quarter of the coming year. Poem Chomsky is one of the records. It's called Poem Chomsky, and a nod to the intellectual linguist Noam Chomsky, and I have another project called Man Drill Music, where it's I'm on all drill beats.
Oh, listen.
So a man on drill beats, man drill music.
Yo, when you get ready to drop, and whatever influence I have and connections I have to help get the word out, let me know and we'll definitely do it, man. So thank you, my brother. Thank your family for I know you sacrificed to be here for this time. May God continue to bless you, man. And we look forward to hearing those 2 new projects. All right.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for having a platform for necessary conversations.
Yes, sir.
Thank
you, my brother. Appreciate you. And for those who are here, we thank you all for tuning in to hear our brother. And as he said, he has these two new projects that's going to be coming out. Make sure we support. So this is your brother Willie Muhammad, once again from I Have a Testimony. We'll be ready to be signing off. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Please donate, because we need the funds to be able to pay for these platforms that we have. Send something. You see the Cash App. And you also see, let me run this other this banner for the Cash App for Closing the Gap as well. Make sure you donate something. Don't, if you say that you're benefiting from it, hit the subscription button. Share with other people, but give something. If everybody gave $1, if you gave $1 a month, we would greatly appreciate it. So thank you, brothers and sisters, and we will be signing off again. And as I said, this is your family, Brother Willie Muhammad. and we're signing off. Peace.
To walk with that man, brother, is to walk with God.
I got that from the Nation of Islam.
He said the right thing with me that just shook me.
Ask Allah for something big.